Hello, Mirage, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Andy. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. This is the first podcast episode of the new academic year for us, and it's fantastic to kick it off with a subject that's so critical. And so over this week, we've got a whole range of interviews and conversations with people contributing to the Festival of Learning and Teaching, which is just fantastic. And I believe you're kind of hot off the press, straight out of a lecture today. So tell us a bit about what you've been discussing today.
Yeah, so I'm a bit out of breath because I've just run up some stairs straight after presenting to be here with you. So it's a pleasure to be here. But yeah, it's been a fascinating day one already. I came early on. I've been listening to some of the other speakers, especially about neurodiversity, and I've been taking notes because I know that I'm going to be implementing them for my students in the coming weeks. So yes, already it's been really powerful.
That's fantastic to hear. Yeah, well, tell us a bit about what you do at the university, Mirage. Tell us your background. How did you get involved with teaching? What's your journey into Salford University?
So I've taken a bit of an unorthodox route. So I'm industry focused. I've come from industry into teaching because I've always wanted to kind of empower other people. It was talent within the organisations that I worked for. But increasingly now, because I've amassed all this kind of industry knowledge, being able to share that with students and help them become much more employable. So a lot of my modules are very much around employability and building those, what employers call soft skills, well, what we tend to call soft skills, but are essentially much needed skills. So I'm a lecturer in digital marketing at Salford Business School. I was at the School of Arts and Media and Creative Technologies before there, but in a more strategic role. And so just right now it's preparing for the next term, which is a bit full on.
Yeah, it's not long before term starts. I mean, digital marketing feels like almost everything these days because it's such a critical part of every industry, whether you are an academic journal, an engineering organization, or a media company. And so your background is in the media side of things. Tell us a bit more about that industry experience.
Yeah, so marketing is where I started my career. So traditional marketing, when the grey hair gives it away. But when things used to go through the letterbox and direct marketing was the thing. And over the years, I've kind of just ridden that crest of the wave into all things digital. And any organisation, vertical sector, they're going through a transformation process. And if anything, because of COVID, lockdown, and how behaviours changed, those organizations that had invested in their digital infrastructure and also marketing reaped the rewards, whereas others are now playing catch up. So in all my roles, predominantly in the media industry, so I've worked for Sky, Channel 4, worked for like some Microsoft and others, but very much around how the impacts of innovation and consumer behavior change and bringing those things together.
I mean, and they're just so dynamic. So in terms of like what you get across to students must be so challenging because it feels like, I mean, in the last couple of years, the rise of TikTok and the amount of things that have transformed in the industry because of that sort of very hyper short video and the way in which people consume content, it's just such a fast moving world, isn't it?
Absolutely. And let's not forget attention span as well. So these are all things that we have to, and this is what my presentation was about today. So, how do we ensure creativity in terms of curriculum design, in terms of assessment design is always there, because we need to be, we're helping and teaching an audience, a cohort who are digitally proficient. They know how to use Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. So yes, we can talk about those things and help them understand. But for me, it's putting it into the context of, how do we now use that to leverage your skills, your knowledge, and make sure the employers that you ultimately want to be working for, or starting up your own business, how do you leverage that? So today I was talking about assessment design and how TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat played a role, not forgetting YouTube and other platforms, but how they play a role in terms of executing campaigns, but at the same time, the learning process as well.
Yeah, and so the theme for today is inclusion and assessment. So I believe you took a kind of deep dive into a module to look at how you can build inclusion and equity into the assessment process. And of course, the whole week is really about trying to level up how we teach and how we think about making learning and teaching both more accessible and engaging and inclusive, but also how we think about some really critical issues that not just we care about as teachers, but also the students care about as well. I see some very sort of powerful videos that you showed today as well. Tell us a bit about the module that you were talking about then and the process towards,
Yeah.
I guess, redesigning assessment with these things in mind.
Absolutely. So, and great question. So, some of the things I may say might be a little bit controversial, but it's more to do with the fact that, you know, I took over a super module that was in, that needed kind of a bit of attention, but was heavily focused on through my analysis and looking at assessments and talking to academics, students, and also industry. I looked at the assessment and it was very essay focused. Now, there's an argument to say, well, actually, there's a need to be able to construct a good, solid essay, critical analysis thinking and so forth. Not disputing that. But for my students who are entering the world, and especially in the creative industries and further afield, because let's face it, any organization needs digital capabilities, it was thinking about, well, what does my cohort look like? And actually, does the assessment mean anything to them? And so what I actually did in terms of this module was I engaged the students and asked them, well, this is what I'm thinking in terms of the assessment. What's your thoughts? What are your views? And keep in mind, these are level 4 students. Yeah. And so, who many think are too green to have an opinion, and so I was actually saying, well, no, I want your opinion. Tell me, what can we do? What can we improve in order for you to enjoy this and also learn something and get something from it?
So that I got to ask you more about this. So this is fascinating. So the first year undergraduates that have come into the module and you're having a conversation with them about what the assessment should be. I mean, from a teaching perspective, I guess often we have to sort of have our assessments approved before the module starts. So tell us how you sort of work through that complexity of having it quite dynamic across the module as it's being taught.
Yes, so my years of client services and client management, account management helped me navigate this kind of building relationships internally, but also expressing what I was thinking about, what I wanted to do. There were certain deadlines that couldn't be moved. There were certain parameters that had to work within. But once I'd got the buy-in from stakeholders in signing off assessments, curriculum design, all that kind of stuff, I was able to get the basics in to get it approved, but then I had the leverage to be able to tweak and change some things. Okay. And so from a, from pedagogy and also making sure it adhered to the rules, it did. Yeah. But it also gave me the opportunity to be a little bit creative.
I mean, it's such a sweet spot, I think, to be in. It's something certainly everyone, I think, can learn from, because I think many lecturers do feel quite tied to that sort of approval process before the module starts. And actually, it's a fantastic thing to sort of engage the students that have joined. Each of, they're going to be different every year with different backgrounds, different contexts, different concerns. So it makes sense that they're sort of involved in that process. So tell us more about that. So was it a kind of first week or two talking about assessment and what that means to them and how they'd like to sort of think about it?
Yeah, and also, just being interested in one of the questions at my session was, how did I broach the subject with them? And I was just, and the answer was really just, I'm in that room, I'm in a position of power, and I wanted to remove those that kind of power dynamic, and just engage with them on a level. And so it was just by asking the questions, why are you here? What's important to you? What impacts you? And the module itself was thinking about, well, I was moving away from essay to group assignments that were presentation focused. And so I said, look, coming back to this is what I'm thinking about. What are you interested in? And so, the first iteration of this module redesign was during lockdown. It was on the back of George Floyd. And there was just so many things happening. And you were seeing companies on LinkedIn and organizations on social media, some being performative, some not. So I thought, this is an opportunity to tap into things that mean things to the students, so that resonate with the students. So I said, look, I'm thinking you're going to be designing a campaign. You're going to launch it. It's going to be a live campaign. You're going to decide based on your target audience, which platforms you decide to execute on. But I'm thinking, I said, look, there's Black Lives Matter, there's greenwashing, sustainability, LGBTQ plus. I said, what have I missed? Is there anything you think that should be up there? And something I was quite surprised about. I mean, we've heard it in the media and people talk about it, but the majority of the students in the room said we'd like to talk about mental health. And I was quite taken, and I'm getting quite emotional about this, talking about it, because all of a sudden it's almost like they were fully engaged, and they wanted to say, and they told me why they wanted me to focus on mental health and others, and other aspects of the mental health area. And so that came part of the list. And so I let the students choose. So in the physical room, when it was all online during lockdown, it was all done through Blackboard and splitting them into groups and letting them self-select, which was challenging. I probably won't do it ever again in that context. But in the physical room, I simply put on the walls the different hashtags or cause-related marketing that they could choose, and gave them a post-it note. And I said, put your name on and go to the one that means the most to you. And that's how the students, that's how I formed groups based on what they chose to do.
So they could then sort of focus their project essentially around that particular area that they were interested in.
Essentially their passion. Yeah. Something that they were really engaged and interested in. And so that was the starting point. So then the groups formed, and we went through the motions of forming kind of mini agencies and doing the research, competitor analysis, all that kind of stuff. The things that you're working against.
Yeah. How many people were in this module? What was the sort of cohort size?
So the first iteration, there was 300 plus students. Then we went down to just over 100, then 100, and then now around 90 to 100. And I think the numbers this year are going to go up slightly.
Okay. So in terms of how you configured that process of sort of choosing and involving, you do that in a sort of big classroom setting, or how was it sort of organized?
Yeah, in a big classroom setting. So the students were with me for a block of 4 hours.
Right.
with lots of breaks, I have to say. But it made it easier in the sense that I could talk to them. I had them in a room, and I could get them working in that way. The one thing we did do, and which was very noticeable, and I showed it in the presentation, was that you'd come into the room and it was laid out in almost lecture style and really formal. And the first thing we did was just get the desks out of the way, and then form little kind of pods and let the groups then work in their pods. And every time they came in, they knew that this was what they were going to do. So after a while, I didn't need to tell them. They would come in, just form their groups, push the desks aside and work around them.
I mean, the whole process just sounds so fantastic and obvious when you hear it, that there's going to be much more personal investment into the process of assessment by doing it this way. And it's often, especially with the first year undergraduates, you wonder how much are they sort of looking for, not just guidance, but actually really sort of clear instructions to what's required of them so they can plan out their time. And not all students sort of cope well with a kind of open-ended or the kind of discoverable sort of approach to teaching. Did you encounter any sort of challenges along the way? What were the things you had to sort of, I guess, adapt to in the development of this?
Yeah, so as part of the development that you're so correct in terms of giving that almost skeleton. It wasn't even a skeleton. It was saying, look, these are the number of slides you're going to work towards. And in these slides, in terms of the matrix and how I'm going to score you, these are the things that you need to make sure that you've done as part of your research and your execution. And so, by default, they had to go live with a particular project. That was part of the marking. But they had to do certain things, a SWOT analysis, PESTLE, doing sufficient research on a brand, critiquing that brand, what could have been done better, understanding, doing a buyer persona around target audience. Those things they had to do. And so that was in the assessment document. It was saying, like, this is what you're going to need to do as a kind of base, and everything else you build on that.
And do they, I mean, presumably they don't go live with the campaign because obviously it's with a particular brand that they choose, or how does it work? Does anything sort of go out there into the public world from their course, or what's it?
Absolutely, yeah. They went live. So the whole thing was about how, and especially the fact is that some of the students fed back saying, look, we went live and we had X number of followers instantly. We built on that following, and it's something I've also mentioned was that, you can, when it comes to your third year and you get into, and you've graduated and you go into an interview, and you're asked, what did you do? I said, you could talk about this project. You could continue. It's up to you. I said, you can decide to just get your mark and forget about it, or you can build on it and just think about how many followers, and done correctly, what you can achieve over 3 years. And that'll be a great example to show a potential employer what you can do and how you achieved it. So they're part of the assignment, and this year especially, you've got to go live. And if you choose, TikTok, you've got to make the justification why. So it's got to be backed up with the research, the target audience, and so forth. But it was great stuff. I know I'm just going on a bit, but it's one of the group were so invested, they then went and got staff from Hollyoaks that was, that had a reach amongst their target audience, interviewed them, created podcasts. They put up posters, digital posters as well as physical posters. So it was a blend of, old and new. Just absolutely did a takeover, the official account. So it was something they really bought into, and it was not only refreshing, but also quite, it made me, there was an element of, I just felt very proud.
I mean, I think it's such a great thing. I always feel it's fantastic to take student work and put it into the public domain and give them that opportunity to see it live beyond just the university walls. I want to talk a bit more about the sort of subject of inclusion and equity, and tell us, how did that component sort of weave its way into the assessment? Was that something that you were foregrounding, or did that come through that dialogue process with the students? Tell us a bit more about that.
Right. So first off, and then kind of, just to be upfront, I'm not a diversity, equity, inclusion specialist. Right. I'm just a person of color with lived experience. That's essentially, that's where I come from. And so, but having that lived experience, I know there are certain barriers, challenges that certain students will face. And when us at the business school have got, 59% of our intake of, are Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, then, and I'm looking at certain assessments and just think, well, how do people, how do people actually engage with this kind of assessment? Yes, it meets all the targets in terms of, making sure from an academic standpoint, but how do we go one step further and actually give the students something that they can actually really be passionate and engaged about? And so the whole issue around inclusion was just to make sure that actually, well, yes, through talking to the students, but also layered with my own personal experiences in the workplace, my experiences in public life, but also even as an academic, the things that I've learned, seeing how that potentially could have a positive impact, on, and that's really, I want to use my platform for that positive impact. And so inclusion and equity for me was very much about ask the question, make sure you listen, and see how you can then work together to make that happen. And I didn't get those changes in all by myself. There were the technical teams helping me, from a technical standpoint, making sure it happened. From the academic standpoint, making sure that I met all the targets. So the likes of Sally Rimmer, Chrissy Patman, Joseph Tellers, and and the list goes on. Callum, so there was just so many people involved in the process. But I'd been given the remit, the leverage and the space by my peers and my my boss, ultimate boss. But then also taking into account, well, actually, from the research and the data that I looked at, I knew that we had students from an A-level background and also a BTEC. And now those BTEC students, they will not have been honing their skills on essay writing, whereas the A-level students would have. So if I can put in a blend, but also make sure that I'm threading or weaving in the requirements from industry, then not only am I doing presentations, not only am I doing face-to-face workshops and seminars, but also I'm creating learning materials that are online. And so working with a third party called DLD and Callum, we designed interactive workbooks that had the whole kind of module curriculum in it, but using video, podcasts, audio, text, Padlets, just lots of different ways. And that enabled the students to be able to work in their own time, at their own pace, but still get the learning, and then come into the workshops and talk about it. So it was a real blended approach.
So how were the interactive workbooks delivered? Were they through Blackboard? Was it
through Blackboard? So
platform, or
through a very painstaking process which wasn't workloaded, I have to say.
Right.
We designed,
never is.
Oh, I know. It was a great idea, but I've now learned to ask for workload. So this is what happens when you come in from industry. You don't really realize all these things. So I worked with the third party, said, look, this is the kind of content that I want to put in through a collaborative process, went through the whole design process. They would then go off and design, create a book that's SCORM compliant, and it was brought into Blackboard.
Amazing. That sounds just fantastic. And I wonder, just sort of stepping back from the module, I wonder how this sort of sits as an assessment within the context of the wider degree, because it sounds very special and it sounds very, very involved. And I wonder, do you sort of think about how it sits amongst the other sort of assessments that are taking place, or how does it sort of feel to you?
Yeah, so I mean, at a program level, things have been changing over time. So business with marketing, business with finance, business, and law. So and my starting point, and the reason why I've redesigned the level 4 is because when I first came into the business school, coming over from the School of Arts and Media and Creative Technologies, I was level 6. And when I was teaching the level 6, I could because I was pushing them hard. Yeah, so I'd make no bones about I'm going to stretch and push you, because you need to get into industry, you need to get a job. And so, but there were gaps, and I realized that actually the best way for me to address these gaps is to go back into earlier on in the process and start putting in the foundations that would mean that by the time they got to level 6, they were ready for what they were going to do. But going back to your question, working with the program leaders, working with colleagues to make sure that the wider offering in terms of subjects and modules, that there was a natural step. So employability feeds into some of the modules, team working, group work, all of these things that do get assessed actually play a role in some of the other assignments. Because for me, I'm saying to the students at level 4, make the mistakes here. Let's try. Don't be scared. Let's make those mistakes. And by the time you get to your second year, where your marks are going to count, we've addressed them, and you're ready to go. So even the person who says, I'm not confident, I don't like to stand up and speak, I say, fine, but let's work on this, because with that time, we can make all the errors that we want, but we can still make it work and pay for the student in level 5 and 6.
Yeah, and I think certainly building confidence is such a critical part of not just the learning process, but also that assessment process. And it can either be a process that lowers confidence or one that can help it grow. And I think having that sort of diversity in how you assess is such a critical way to do that. And I wonder, sort of moving now into the new academic year, I imagine this module is being delivered again. Are you going to do anything different? So how are you going to think that worked really well? Let's just go with it again, or tell us a bit about what your plans are.
Yeah, so the things have to change slightly because, part of it's going to be online, some of it's going to be face-to-face, so that brings its own challenges. but the core will still remain the same. So
yeah,
I will be engaging the students. I will be speaking to them. I will ask them questions. I will share my journey, my career history, because I think that goes a long way to breaking down that power dynamic. And
yes,
if I can do that, then they can actually, a lot of the students can see themselves represented for a start,
yeah,
so they feel comfortable. In terms of my personal journey, it doesn't matter what background you're from, you can relate to it. And so that allows me to have a dialogue that's really meaningful. And so I will still have that. And then with the teaching team, because we've got 8 workshops over spanning over a week, a number of teachers or tutors. So we just have to make sure. Well, I'm designing it right now, so the assignment will pretty much stay the same, but instead of a recorded online presentation that they would have to submit, which we did previously, this time it's going to be in-person presentations. So we will mark them presenting to us in a classroom.
Fantastic. Well, such a great experience to have, and it's a wonderful module. And please, I will ask you to share with us the live work that they produce. I'd love to see what's coming out of that module. I think we have this sort of work happening in so many parts of the universities. I think it'd be great for students to learn from each other. But many congratulations, and it's wonderful to hear this level of innovation and inclusion. I think is my key message. The key message for me from today is just having that dialogue with students at the start, rather than just tell them stuff, to actually find out what they care about, what they're interested in, and what they want to do. So I think it's such a critical part of your module. It's wonderful to hear about.
No, thank you. And I will be sharing with them this year work from the previous year, because some of the work that was done around greenwashing in one student, level 4 student, I just need to share this with you. They produced a booklet, an ebook on ways in which you can actually see how a company is greenwashing. And they designed it. It was beautifully designed. It was a PDF. It was downloadable. It was shareable. There were so many things that they did, and I was just so impressed with this. A level 4 student that people would say, well, they don't. They're only coming in. What do they know? And actually, they know a lot, and we just need to trust them and empower them to do what's right.
And is that out there? Is that public?
It is. Yeah. So I will ask them if I can share it with you. It went out public. Yeah, they put it out on Facebook, because the target audience, they wanted to appeal to a target audience that were their mums and dads' age.
Yeah.
Through their research, they felt that it was Facebook was the right platform for them.
Fantastic. Well, if you're able to share it, please do put it on Twitter or somewhere, tag it with Salford LTF, and we'd love to see it. But thanks so much for being here, Mirage. It's wonderful to hear about these really inspiring stories. And yeah, look forward to seeing you again too, I'm sure.
That's great. Thanks, Andy, for giving me the chance to share some of this work that,
it's great. Take care. Have a good rest of your day.
Cheers. Thank you.